The silent arrival, the empire that ruled the stars, the Kriyth Empire had controlled 47 star systems for over 2 centuries. Their power was absolute. Their technology was advanced beyond most species' understanding. Their warriors were bred for combat from birth, standing 3 m tall with exoskeletons harder than military-grade titanium, but their greatest weapon was not physical strength, it was their ability to project fear directly into the minds of their enemies. Emperor Vax. Thor sat upon his throne of crystallized darkness, watching reports from across his domain. He was ancient by Kriyth standards, having ruled for 90 years. His forearms rested on the throne's armrests, each hand bearing scars from 1,000 battles. His eyes, all 6 of them, glowed with a deep crimson light that made even his own advisors uncomfortable. Another species has requested membership in the galactic community. His intelligence master, Zathrex, reported. Zathrex was younger, only 40 cycles old, but he had proven himself cunning and ruthless. They call themselves humans. They come from a small world on the outer edge of the Orion arm. Vax. Thor made a dismissive gesture with his upper right hand. What do they offer? What technology? What resources? Very little, my lord. Their ships are adequate but not impressive. Their weapons are primitive compared to ours. They have no psychic abilities that we can detect. They are a young species, barely 300 years into space travel. The Emperor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Then why do they dare approach the galactic stage? Do they not know that the weak are consumed by the strong? Zathrex's expression shifted slightly. There is something unusual about them, my lord. They seem to lack the proper response to our presence. When our diplomatic vessel approached their space, they did not show fear. They showed curiosity. Curiosity. Bakexther leaned forward. Explain, their representatives asked many questions. They wanted to understand our culture, our history, our biology. They seemed genuinely interested rather than terrified. Our psychic projections had no visible effect on them. The Emperor considered this for a moment. Perhaps they are simply too primitive to understand the danger. No matter if they wish to join the galactic community, they will learn their place soon enough. Accept their application. Place them in the outer territories where they can be useful without interfering with important matters. Zathrex bowed and departed. He did not share his Emperor and LT Unk and GT's casual dismissal. Something about the humans troubled him. In his 40 years of service, he had encountered dozens of species. All of them responded to cryo power in predictable ways. They showed fear, submission, or occasionally foolish defiance that was quickly crushed. The humans showed none of these things. They simply watched and learned. The arrival of Earth. 3 months later, the human delegation arrived at the Galactic Council Station. Ambassador Rebecca Torres led the group. She was a woman of 55 years with gray-streaked black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had spent 30 years in Earth's diplomatic corps, negotiating treaties and resolving conflicts. She had seen humanity at its best and worst. She knew what her species was capable of. Beside her walked General William Hartman, a career military officer with 40 years of experience. He was tall for a human, standing just over 2 m, with broad shoulders and hands that bore the calluses of someone who still trained with weapons despite his rank. His face was weathered, lined with scars from wars that most of the galaxy knew nothing about. The council chamber was enormous, built to accommodate species of all sizes. The Kryll occupied the dominant position, their massive forms casting shadows across the other delegates. Tors noticed how the other species kept their distance from the Empire's representatives, how their body language spoke of fear poorly concealed. Humans of Earth, Zathrex announced, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. You have been granted provisional membership in the galactic community. You will be assigned territories in the outer regions. You will pay tribute to the Empire as all species do. You will provide resources and labor as required. Do you accept these terms? Taurus smiled. It was a polite smile, the kind diplomats learned early in their careers. We accept membership in the galactic community. However, we must respectfully decline the tribute requirements. Earth maintains its sovereignty. We will trade fairly with all species, but we will not pay tribute to any empire. The chamber fell silent. Several smaller species delegates made sounds of shock. No one spoke to the Kryllet this way. No one refused their demands. Zathrex's eyes narrowed. He focused his psychic abilities on the human ambassador, projecting waves of primal terror. It was a technique that had brought warrior kings to their knees, that had made entire populations submit without a shot being fired. Tor's smile didn't waver. Is something wrong? Intelligence. Master, you seem to be concentrating very hard on something. Zathrex intensified his projection. Fear should be flooding the human's mind now. She should be trembling, sweating, perhaps even losing control of her bodily functions. Instead, she stood calmly, one eyebrow slightly raised in polite inquiry. General Hartman spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and carried easily across the chamber. If you're attempting some form of psychic attack, you should know it won't work. Humans don't respond to external fear projection. Our fears come from within, and we've learned to master them over 10,000 years of warfare. You dare threaten the Empire? Vaxer's voice boomed through the chamber. He rose from his position, his 3M frame towering over the humans. We threaten no one. Tors replied calmly. We simply state facts. We come in peace. We offer friendship and fair trade to all species, but we will not submit to anyone. If the galactic community cannot accept Earth as an equal partner, then we will respectfully decline membership and maintain our independence. The Emperor stared at the small human female. She was barely half his height. Her species had no natural weapons, no armor, no psychic abilities. By all measures, they should be insignificant. Yet she stood before him without fear, speaking of equality as if she had the power to demand it. You will learn your place, Vithor said coldly. The galaxy has no room for species that do not understand the natural order. The strong rule, the weak serve. This is the way of things. Taurus nodded slowly. Perhaps on your world's emperor on Earth, we have a different saying. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. I hope you'll remember that. The human delegation departed. Council chamber erupted in whispered conversations. Several species representatives looked hopeful for the first time in years. Others looked terrified, knowing that the Empire would make an example of these foolish humans. Zathrex approached his emperor. Shall I order their elimination, my lord? Bacter considered. No, not yet. Let them return to their territories, let them believe they have won some small victory, then we will show them the price of defiance, send a raiding fleet to one of their outer colonies, a small one, make it a lesson they will never forget. The attack on Theta 7. Theta 7 was a farming colony on the edge of human space. 5,000 colonists lived there, growing crops in vast hydroponic facilities. They had been there for only 10 years, building a new life far from Earth's crowded cities. They had families, children, dreams of a peaceful future among the stars. The Cryo raiding fleet arrived without warning. 6 warships carrying 300 warriors. It should have been more than enough. Colony had minimal defenses, just a few security personnel and some basic weapons for dealing with local wildlife. Commander the Gale led the raid. He was a veteran of 50 campaigns, a warrior who had conquered 12 worlds in the Emperor's name. This would be a simple mission. Land, terrify the population, take captives, leave destruction in their wake, send a message to Earth that defiance has consequences. The warriors landed in the colony central plaza just after dawn. The Scale activated his psychic projection at full power. The wave of fear should have paralyzed every human within a kilometer radius. Instead, something unexpected happened. The colonists stopped what they were doing. They looked at the Cryo warriors, then they began moving with purpose. Parents sent children to protected shelters, adults armed themselves with whatever weapons were available. The colony's security chief, a woman named Patricia Engin, who had served in Earth's defense forces before retirement, activated an emergency beacon and began coordinating the defense. They're not running, one of the Scale's warriors observed. Why aren't they running? It doesn't matter, the Zale growled. Kill the ones who resist. Take the rest captive. First warrior to advance toward a group of colonists was shot. Patricia Engin had placed herself between the Krieth and the shelter entrance. She held an old plasma rifle, military surplus from Earth's last border conflict. Her first shot took the warrior in the center mass, penetrating his exoskeleton. The Krieth warrior fell, shock evident in his dying expression. It was impossible. His armor should have withstood that weapon unless the humans knew exactly where to aim for maximum damage. Defensive positions, that Scale ordered. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Civilians didn't fight back. They didn't have military-grade weapons. They didn't know Kralith weak points, but these humans did. The colonists of Theta 7 fought with efficiency that spoke of training. Many were former military people who had chosen quiet lives after serving their time. They had thought they were done with war. They were wrong. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 70 Krieth warriors were dead. The humans had lost 140 colonists. By Krieth standards, it should have been a victory. They had inflicted greater losses, but the Scale knew the truth. This had been a disaster. His force should have overwhelmed the colony in minutes. Instead, they had barely survived. As his ships limped away from Theta 7, the Zale sent his report to Zathrex. The words were simple but carried terrible implications. The humans do not break, they do not fear, and they fight like nothing we have encountered before. Request immediate reinforcements on Theta 7. Patricia Engin stood among the ruins of her colony. Around her, survivors worked to treat the wounded and honor the dead. She looked up at the stars and spoke. Into her communicator, this is Chief Ingin to Earth Defense Command. The Empire has declared war whether they admit it or not. Request immediate military presence in the outer colonies. And tell Special Forces Command that we're going to need them because if the Kryll won a war, she paused, her jaw set with determination. We're going to teach them what happens when you attack humanity across human space. The message spread. The Empire had made its move. Now Earth would respond, and the galaxy was about to learn why humanity had survived 10,000 years of warfare on a harsh world. They were about to learn why humans had a word that no other species understood. Marines, soldiers, Rangers, SEALs, Special Forces. The hunters become the hunted. The call to arms. 6 weeks after the attack on Theta 7, the Kryll Empire controlled 3 more human colonies. Emperor Vax Thor believed victory was inevitable. The humans had fought harder than expected. Yes, but they were still losing ground. Each conquered world added to the Empire's glory. Each human captive served as a warning to other species that might consider defiance. What the Emperor didn't know was that Earth had been preparing not for diplomacy, not for peaceful coexistence, but for the day when words would fail and violence would become necessary, because humans had learned a harsh truth over millennia of conflict. Hope for peace, but prepare for war. General Hartman stood in the command center beneath Geneva, 300 m below the surface. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every human vessel, every colony, every Kryth fleet, but his attention was focused on a smaller display showing 12 faces, men and women of various ages, various backgrounds, united by one thing: they were the best warriors humanity had ever produced. Ladies and gentlemen, Hartman began. Thank you for answering the call. I know most of you thought your fighting days were over. I know you were promised peace after your service. I'm sorry that promise couldn't be kept. One of the faces, a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes, spoke. General, we all knew peace was temporary. Warriors don't retire. We just wait for the next war. What do you need from us? Her name was Colonel Sarah Martinez. She had led special operations teams for 20 years. Before accepting a teaching position at the academy, she was 52 years old. Mother of 3, grandmother of 1, she was also one of the most dangerous human beings alive. The Kryth think they're predators, Hartman explained. They've built their entire civilization on fear and dominance. They've never encountered prey that bites back. We're going to change that. Colonel Martinez, you'll lead Operation Nightfall. Your target is the Kryth command structure. Hit their officers, their logistics, their communication networks. Make them afraid to sleep. Martinez nodded. Ghost protocol, full authorization, no rules of engagement except one: bring your people home. Another face leaned forward. This was Sergeant Elena Vasquez, younger than Martinez at 38, but with eyes that had seen too much. She specialized in infiltration and assassination. General, the Kryll have psychic abilities. How do we counter that? You already do, Hartman replied. Theta 7 proved that human psychology is fundamentally different from other species. The Kryll project. External fear. We generate internal fear, and we've learned to control it. Their abilities don't work on us. That's our advantage. A third face belonging to Major Marcus Chin asked the question. They were all thinking, what about the other species? The Kryll have captives from a dozen worlds. If we strike hard, they might retaliate against civilians. Hartman's expression hardened. That's why your secondary objective is rescue operations. We're not just fighting the Kryll, we're showing the galaxy that there's an alternative to submission. Every captive we free, every colony we defend sends a message. Humanity protects the weak. The 12 faces on the screen understood this wasn't just about defeating an empire, it was about changing the galaxy's fundamental assumptions about power and survival. You deploy in 72 hours, Hartman concluded. May whatever gods you believe in watch over you, and may the Kryll never see you coming. Operation Nightfall begins. The Kryll military outpost on Vexter Terra Prime was considered impregnable. It was surrounded by defense shields, protected by automated weapons, garrisoned by 500 elite warriors. It served as the command center for all Kryth operations in the outer spiral arm. Intelligence Master Zathrex himself was scheduled to visit in 3 days to oversee the next phase of the human conquest. Colonel Sarah Martinez and her team of 16 operators arrived on Vexter Prime 48 hours before Zathrex. They didn't arrive in a warship or a transport. They arrived as refugees on a civilian vessel, hiding them legitimate travelers fleeing the war zones. Martinez watched the outpost from a cafe 3 km away. She sipped something the locals called tea, though it tasted nothing like Earth tea. Beside her, Lieutenant James Park reviewed data on a handheld device disguised as a reading tablet. Security rotation changes every 6 hours, Park reported quietly. Shield generator is in the western section. Communication array on the roof. Armory in the basement. Commander's quarters are on the 3rd floor northeast corner. Martinez nodded. Demolitions. Sergeant Williams has the charges ready. Enough to bring down the entire structure if needed. We're not bringing it down, Martinez said. We're sending a message. Precision, not destruction. That night, as Vexter Prime slept, Martinez's team moved. They were dressed in adaptive camouflage that shifted colors to match their surroundings. They carried weapons designed for silence and efficiency, and they moved with the confidence of people who had done this hundreds of times before. The first guard died without making a sound. Corporal Diana Foster's knife found the weak point in his exoskeleton, severing the nerve cluster that controlled his vocal cords before he could alert others. The 2nd and 3rd guards fell to precisely aimed rounds from suppressed weapons inside the outpost. Lieutenant Park led 4 operators to the communication array. They didn't destroy it. Instead, they installed sophisticated monitoring equipment that would allow Earth to intercept every message the Kryth sent. Knowledge was power, and Earth needed every advantage. In the basement, Sergeant Thomas Williams and his team reached the armory. They could have destroyed the weapons stored there. Instead, they reprogrammed the security systems, locking the Kryth out of their own arsenal. When the warriors tried to access their weapons in the morning, they would find themselves helpless. Martinez herself led the primary assault on the commander's quarters. General Krax was a veteran of 100 campaigns, a warrior who had personally killed 3 rival species champions in single combat. He was feared throughout the Kryth military. He was also asleep when Martinez entered his room, the general. Woke to find a human female standing. Over him, a weapon pointed at his primary heart. His first instinct was to activate his psychic projection. Fear flooded outward enough to paralyze a dozen warriors. Martinez didn't even blink. "That doesn't work on us," she said. "Quietly, I need you to understand something, General. Your empire believes it's the apex predator in this galaxy. You're wrong. We're not prey. We're not even your equals. We're something you've never encountered before. We're the species that became dominant on a death world by learning to hunt everything that hunted us." Crack reached for the alarm beside his bed. Martinez shot his hand, the round penetrating cleanly through his palm and embedding in the wall behind him. The general roared in pain. "I'm not here to kill you," Martinez continued. "I'm here to deliver a message. Tell your emperor that every colony he takes will take 2 of his outposts. Every human he kills will kill 20 of his warriors. Every act of aggression will be met with overwhelming retaliation. But tell him we're also offering one chance at peace. Withdraw from human space. Leave us alone and we'll leave you alone." She backed toward the window. "Or don't withdraw. Keep coming and learn what happens when you hunt humans." Martinez activated a device on her wrist. Explosions rocked the outpost, not enough to destroy, but enough to terrify. The lights went out. Emergency alarms blared, and in the chaos, Martinez and her team vanished into the night. By the time Kriith reinforcements arrived, the human operators were already off-world, traveling with false identities among refugee populations. They left behind a command center in ruins, a general humiliated, and an entire garrison questioning whether they were the hunters or the hunted. The impossible mission. While Martinez struck at command centers, other teams executed equally audacious operations across Kriith space. But the most dangerous mission fell to Major Marcus Chin and his 6-person team. The Kriith had taken 1,500 captives from various species, including 200 humans. They were being held on the fortress world of Cryas, deep in the heart of Empire territory. The fortress was surrounded by a fleet of 30 warships. The captives were being held in a facility protected by 1,000 guards. Earth High Command considered the captives lost. There was no realistic way to reach them, let alone extract them. Sending a military fleet would start a full-scale war that humanity wasn't ready to fight. Marcus Chin looked at the tactical data and saw something different. He saw a challenge. He saw people who needed help, and he saw an opportunity to prove that humans never abandoned their own. "This is insane," his second-in-command, Captain Lisa Monroe, said as they reviewed the plan. "We're 6 people trying to infiltrate the most heavily defended world in the Empire. Even if we reach the captives, getting them out is impossible." Chin smiled. It was the smile of someone who had done impossible things before. The Krya think in terms of military power. They expect fleets and armies. They're not prepared for 6 people who don't care about odds. Team infiltrated Cryas inside a cargo vessel delivering supplies to the fortress. They hid in radiation-shielded containers that made scanning impossible. For 3 days they waited. Complete darkness, breathing recycled air, trusting that their plan would work. When the cargo was delivered to the fortress, Chen's team emerged and began moving through maintenance Tunnels, they had studied the fortresses. Designed for weeks, memorizing every corridor, every security checkpoint, every patrol route. Sergeant David Kim disabled security systems as they went, leaving no trace of their intrusion. Corporal Rachel Stone eliminated guards. When necessary, her shots so precise that other guards didn't notice their companions were missing until hours later. They reached the detention level. After 12 hours of careful infiltration, 200 humans were held in cells designed for species twice their size. Many were injured, all were malnourished, but when they saw Chen's team, hope returned to their eyes. Earth hasn't forgotten you, Shin told them quietly. But we need to move fast and stay silent. Can you do that? The freed captives nodded. They had survived Kriith captivity. They could survive anything. Getting out was harder than getting in. Chen's team led 200 people through maintenance tunnels, too small for Kriith warriors to follow. They moved through waste processing systems, through air circulation ducts, through power conduits where the heat was almost unbearable. When alarms finally sounded, they were already at the spaceport. Chin had arranged for a stolen Kriith transport to be waiting. It was a desperate gamble. The fortress was on high alert, warships surrounded the planet. One small transport shouldn't have been able to escape, but Chin had planned for this. As the transport launched, hidden explosives planted throughout the fortress detonated, not enough to cause massive casualties, but enough to create chaos. Power systems failed, communication networks went dark. In the confusion, one small transport slipped through the defensive perimeter and jumped to hyperspace. By the time the Kriith realized what had happened, Chen's team and all 200 captives were halfway to human space. The fortress commander was executed for incompetence. The fleet admiral responsible for security was demoted, and across the Empire, warriors whispered nervously about the humans who could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish like ghosts. Turning point. Intelligence Master Zathrex stood before Emperor Vaxthor, knowing his life hung by a thread. In 3 months, the humans had struck 47 targets. Across the Empire, they had killed over 2,000 warriors. They had freed hundreds of captives. They had made the Kriith the galaxy's apex predators afraid. How is this possible? Vaxthor demanded. They are a weak species. They have no psychic abilities. Their technology is inferior. Yet they defeat us again and again. Zathrex chose his words carefully. My Emperor, we have fundamentally misunderstood the humans. We assumed they were like other species. We were wrong. Explain. Every species we have conquered developed on worlds where they were the prey. They evolved to flee from predators, to submit when resistance was futile. Humans evolved differently. On their world, they were both predator and prey. They learned to hunt while being hunted. They developed weapons because they had no natural defenses. They mastered fire because they had no fur or scales. They conquered their world through intelligence, determination, and an absolute refusal to give up. The Emperor's 6 eyes narrowed. What are you saying? I'm saying that when we project fear at them, it doesn't work. Because they've been dealing with fear for millions of years. I'm saying that when we try to overwhelm them with numbers, they adapt tactics we've never seen. I'm saying that every technique we use to dominate other species fails against humans because they are fundamentally different from anything we've encountered, Vaxthor stood from his throne. Then what do you recommend? Zathrax took a deep breath. Peace, my lord. We should negotiate a treaty with Earth. Define clear boundaries. Offer them respect as equals. The Emperor's voice was dangerous. You would have me treat these creatures as equals? Yes, my lord, because the alternative is continued losses. The humans have shown they can strike anywhere in our territory. They've proven they will not submit, and intelligence reports suggest they have only deployed a fraction of their military capacity. If we continue this war, it will cost us dearly. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Finally he spoke. Arrange a meeting with their representatives, but make it clear this is not surrender. This is a recognition of mutual strength. Zathrax bowed deeply. Yes, my Emperor. 3 weeks later, Ambassador Rebecca Torres returned to the Galactic Council station. This time she arrived with an escort of human warships, not many, just enough to make a point. General Hartman accompanied her along with Colonel Martinez and Major Chin. Emperor Vax Thor stood to address the assembly. For the first time in Kreath history, he spoke words that no emperor had ever spoken. The Empire recognizes Earth as an independent sovereign power. We will withdraw from human space. We will respect human territorial claims. We will engage in fair trade and diplomatic relations. Taurus inclined her head. Earth accepts these terms. We also propose something new to this galaxy. Mutual defense pact, not just between Earth and the Kryll Empire, but among all species. We've proven that tyranny can be defeated. Now let's prove that cooperation can build something better. The other species delegates, silent for so long under Kreath domination, began to speak. One by one they voiced support for Tor's proposal. The Empire had ruled through fear. Humanity offered something different, hope. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change. The Kryll remained powerful, but they learned to negotiate rather than dominate. Other species found their voices, their courage renewed by humanity's example, and Earth's special forces, those warriors who had struck terror into the hearts of the galaxy's greatest predators, returned to their families and their quiet lives. But they remained ready because humanity had learned another lesson over its long history. Peace was precious and worth fighting for. But peace only lasted as long as there were those willing to defend it. Colonel Sarah Martinez retired to a small farm in New Zealand. Major Marcus Chin accepted a teaching position at the academy. Sergeant Elena Vasquez wrote a book about the war that became required reading in military schools across human space, and sometimes late at night they would look up at the stars and remember the time when humanity proved that size doesn't determine strength, that fear can be conquered, and that the smallest species can sometimes cast the longest shadow. The Kryll had believed they were the galaxy's ultimate hunters. They learned the truth that humans had known for millennia. In nature, the most dangerous predators are often the ones you underestimate. The galaxy called them special forces, a term that meant nothing to most alien species, but to those who had faced them, who had seen them appear from shadows and vanish into darkness, who had watched them do impossible things in impossible situations. The name carried weight. They were humanity's answer to those who would prey upon the weak. They were the promise that Earth kept to its citizens. And allies, they were the reason that, after the war, when species spoke of humans, they spoke with respect because the galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans didn't carry weapons because they were weak. They carried weapons because they knew what monsters looked like. They had been fighting monsters since they lived in caves and feared the dark, and they had never stopped winning.